So let's fast forward to the future, and Bitcoin has failed. How did it fail?
I think it fails through irrelevance. Like it fails to be relevant to people on a daily basis. If it just ends up being store of value and nothing more, I don't I don't think it gains relevance at all. I think it has to be payments for it to be relevant on the everyday. Otherwise, it's just something you kind of buy and forget and only use in emergency situations or when you want to get liquid again. So I think if it doesn't transition to payments and find that everyday use case, it just gets increasingly irrelevant. And that's failure to me.
Welcome back to the Kaspa Silver YouTube channel. In today's video, I want to talk about why Bitcoin Layer 2 solutions do not actually compete with Kaspa. The video clip that you just saw in the beginning was Jack Dorsey talking about how he views Bitcoin failing, and he believes that if it does not be used as an everyday payment type of network, that it will fail. If it's just a store of value, it will not actually survive because it just won't be relevant. Jack Dorsey is an American businessman. He's the co-founder of Twitter and was also the CEO of Twitter. He is also the principal executive officer and chairman of Block, and also the developer of the Square financial services platform. If you're familiar with Cash App, Jack Dorsey is pretty much behind that as well. And this is the problem that I see with Bitcoin in the future, is that it isn't actually being used as payments. And if we look at the Bitcoin white paper, you could see that the title of Bitcoin was a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The first sentence says a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. The whole intention of Bitcoin was to remove middlemen from the equation when we are transacting our wealth. And today, because Bitcoin is not prioritizing scaling, they're now producing layer 2 so-called solutions as a way to claim that Bitcoin can scale this way. But this is just simply not true. And I firmly believe that Bitcoin is basically just keeping us trapped in the same exact system that we're supposed to be exiting. This user right here said something very profound. Digital money that truly serves humanity must settle directly on the base layer. Anything that moves off of it, even briefly, reintroduces the trust, control, and corruption of the fiat system we seek to escape. Kaspa is the only monetary settlement layer that matters. I say here in this post, one property of cash is that it has instant settlement. If you don't have that, what actually happens is you get pushed to another layer, and now you are transacting softer money. You do this on a proof of work system, and not only are you transacting softer money, you are also no longer supporting the network with your transactions. Digital cash to be sustainable would also require internet speed settlement, or else you're building gold 2.0, which eventually everyone gets off of the sovereign layer, and we miss the whole purpose of a digital cash system backed by proof of work. And so for me, I just firmly believe that if Bitcoin remains in its current state, it's basically just repeating history. We know that back in 1971, President Nixon terminated the convertibility of the US dollar to gold and put America completely on a fiat system where it's not backed by any kind of hard money anymore. And we got this very centralized system. But the reason why it all started was because gold wasn't as scalable. That was the hard money. And then they introduced fiat, which was the layer 2. And this layer 2 is what was controlled by the governments and is still what's in control today. The goal of Bitcoin was to be an alternative to fiat and actually help us exit it. But its lack of scaling capabilities prevents you from actually using it on the base layer and moves you to layer 2, which is very similar to what happened with gold. Since gold wasn't scalable, they moved you to a layer 2 with fiat. Because Bitcoin isn't scalable, they're now trying to move you over to layer 2s that are IOU Bitcoins and introduce a lot more centralization concerns. You lose your self-sovereignty, and ultimately, you're not even supporting the base layer, because every single transaction that happens on these layer 2 so-called solutions don't actually produce any income for miners in terms of fees. Every single proof of work system has a block reward. This block reward, typically in most proof of work systems, goes to 0, and then fees are supposed to take over to keep the miners sustainable. Now, this chart is just basically showing how much miners are paid per block, and currently you can see that miners are being paid per block about $358,000 per block. But as you can see, this is actually down from the halving, because when the halving happened, the block reward got a 50% cut. So that means there was a 50% cut in mining revenue. And so basically the only way Bitcoin can keep this mining revenue sustainable is if it doubles every single 4 years for eternity, which I personally do not believe that's sustainable, or it gets used enough so that fees can just take over the mining revenue. But I also personally don't believe that Bitcoin is actually built to be a system that is used frequently, because the incentives are so poor. Because it is not scalable, it actually leads to centralization, and because it is not scalable, it's leading people to actually use these different layers, and these different layers do not even support the base layer of Bitcoin. The only thing that supports the base layer of Bitcoin is the initial onboarding, getting you onto these layers. But the problem is the base layer can't even handle that many transactions. So it still means that these layer 2s are limited by the very slow throughput of the base layer. So clearly Bitcoin is just simply not built to be something for the masses. It is just simply not capable of handling that much throughput. And so to me, this just simply tells me that there's still a very huge gap wide open for something to still tap in to digital cash, peer-to-peer electronic cash that is fully self-sovereign, fully decentralized, fully secure, and can actually be for the masses, so that we don't actually have to be forced into using other solutions that are actually not even keeping our self-sovereignty, and in reality just keeping us in the same exact system that we are already in. And this is where I believe Kaspa comes in to the scene. Let me go ahead and play a clip of Michael Saylor here, basically telling you how he sees the future of Bitcoin.
Ultimately, the base network is going to have 10 to 100,000 big financial institutions that are going to be settling large amounts. And I think the network's going to scale in the layer 2s and the layer 3s. I think something, the Lightning network is going to end up being a high speed, high frequency, lower value settlement network that will stitch together 100,000 or 1 million websites or 1 million mobile apps. Or you could imagine everybody with a mobile app that has payments built in. At some point, they might go peer-to-peer. They won't do it on the base layer. They'll do it on an open protocol layer 2, most likely. And then there'll be like massive competition between Coinbase and Cash App and all the traders and the banks and the high frequency, traders and the next person running MasterCard or Visa, and they'll try to create these layer 3s. And they'll have a layer 3 protocol, and
I'll just stop it there. I think that kind of explains it very well. He firmly believes that the masses are going to be living in the layer 2. You're not going to be using the base layer. The institutions are going to be using the base layer, and they're going to be competing for your fees because they want to provide you a solution to actually be able to use your Bitcoin. And so we're going to take a look at some of the layer 2 solutions that currently exist for Bitcoin, and kind of just show their flaws and why they're just not really solutions, and in reality is very parasitic to Bitcoin. So this is the Liquid network. The Liquid network is actually created by Blockstream. And basically the way this works is that you lock Bitcoin up. As you can see here, if we look at the home page, you could see that this is the amount of Bitcoin that's locked up. There's 4,157 Bitcoin that's not moving. It looks like it hasn't been moving for a very long time. Ever since 2020, there's been 2,000 Bitcoin in here that's just not moving. So that means that's Bitcoin that's never really producing any fees for the base layer network. And so after you lock this Bitcoin up, it is then controlled by a multi-sig called the Liquid Federation, and it's a 11 of 15 multi-sig wallet to process all of the requests that people may make in this network. So automatically, when you move on to this network, you are introducing some centralization concerns, because the question then becomes, who is actually controlling this Bitcoin? Well, it is a group of cryptocurrency businesses, including exchanges, trading desks, infrastructure companies, game developers, and more. The Federation fulfills a number of tasks that are integral to the Liquid network operation. And you could see right here that if I go to the Federation here, it says Liquid is governed by its federation of members, which are geographically and geopolitically dispersed around the world. Among these members are 15 functionary operators who host and run secure infrastructure that proposes and sign the blocks. A threshold of 11 out of those 15 must agree and sign a block. But this just basically means that this system is just centralized to about 15 entities that could become single points of failure. Things that can actually be controlled by the government and regulated in some kind of way, where this Bitcoin could maybe even get seized or something like that. So you're just reintroducing trust, which the whole point of Bitcoin was to no longer have to trust middlemen, but you're once again trusting middlemen so that then you can get LBTC and you'll be able to move LBTC very fast to other users that are able to accept LBTC. And then later this gets settled on the base layer. And so the problem with this is that you're facing the fact that every single transaction that is happening on here is not actually supporting the network. As you can see, though, this is not really being used that much at all. But what is interesting about this solution is that it has its own fee market as well. It says right here, how do transaction fees on the Liquid work? Every transaction on the Liquid network includes a fee paid in Liquid BTC. Liquid transaction fees work in a similar way to transaction fees on Bitcoin, which are paid in Bitcoin. Transaction fees for all transfers on Liquid are always paid in LBTC. That means when sending any LBTC, the sender needs to hold a small amount of LBTC to pay the fee. How are the fees determined? Well, very similar to Bitcoin. If the blocks on the Liquid network start to become full, then a fee market will kick in. And then you will basically have to outbid other people to be able to be included into the next block. And it looks like these blocks take about 1 minute to process. So essentially, if this gets adopted at a massive scale, you may run into the same problems that you kind of face on Bitcoin, but now you enter a brand new fee market that's not even supporting the Bitcoin network. Instead, it's actually supporting Blockstream. So it says right here, who receives Liquid transaction fees? And it says all the fees are sent to a wallet controlled by Blockstream. So this is exactly my point here. You are being sold a layer 2 solution to make sure that your Bitcoin can actually move. And who's benefiting off of it? A centralized entity, a middleman. That's basically what's happening with Bitcoin. And instead of you staying on the base layer and remaining self-sovereign and being able to use your Bitcoin, because of its lack of scalability, big players are able to sell you a solution and profit off of you. And this is what I see Bitcoin basically becoming in the future, just like how Michael Saylor was saying, that it's not really being an alternative to fiat for the world. It's only going to be an alternative for fiat for the privileged people, the people that were probably in there first, to have a lot of money in there to actually afford the fees that may happen if Bitcoin was to use in a scale that people think it may be used one day, which I just don't actually see that happening because of its very, very low incentives to be used. But really, I don't see any kind of new thing happening here with Bitcoin. It's kind of just recreating the current system that we are already in. Funny enough, though, the Liquid network doesn't really even scale. itself, it's still limited by the similar type of throughput that Bitcoin has. So you can pretty much only expect about 480,000 transactions per day on the high end, especially because since all of its transactions are confidential, it actually requires a little bit more space per transaction. So the blocks could actually get full a whole lot quicker. And so you're still limited for only 480,000 transactions. Whereas if you compare that to Kaspa, Kaspa can do 200 million plus transactions on the base layer without any layer 2s. The next layer 2 solution that is heavily talked about is the Lightning Network. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of how the Lightning Network works, but I am going to share with you some sources that are going to be very, very good and helpful for you to listen on your own time to actually understand the Lightning Network and understand all its flaws. This video right here is by Aviv Zohar. He goes over the Lightning Network and he actually talks about some attack vectors that the Lightning Network has, which just goes to show that if you move to this Lightning Network, you only expose yourself to more issues. There's also this video called The Lightning Network Has Failed. And this is a very, very good video that's pretty basic to understand how the Lightning Network works and also its flaws, and basically showing that if this was to actually become adopted, it still would only support people who are fiat privileged and still wouldn't even be able to scale to the masses without just becoming super centralized. And then the last source to learn about the Lightning Network is from the book called Hijacking Bitcoin. It is chapter 9, and I like to just listen to this book, but you can see right here, chapter 9, the Lightning Network. If you listen to that chapter, you'll learn a lot about the Lightning Network and its flaws as well. And this is just like an Easter egg here, but Lightning Labs, the developer of the Lightning Network, was recognized by the World Economic Forum as one of the technology pioneers for 2020. And if you're not already aware, the World Economic Forum is known for the phrase saying, "You will own nothing and be happy." And so I really wonder why they're very excited about Lightning Network, unless they actually really know what's really happening here, where the Lightning Network really is just reintroducing systems that we already currently have, but it just allows you to actually control people who are in Bitcoin now, because once you move into the Lightning Network, you give up your self-sovereignty. And so Lightning Network just does not scale Bitcoin. It reintroduces trust. It introduces new attack vectors. It's not convenient for the masses at all. It's still limited by the base layer of Bitcoin. And last, but certainly not in the least, it just does not support the base layer of Bitcoin. And then the last layer 2 solution is called Fedimint, which is a very centralized layer 2 solution. I really don't understand why anyone would actually be willing to adopt this, especially at scale. But basically, it's similar to the Liquid network, whereas you are trusting a group of centralized people to basically handle your Bitcoin, and it's going to be a multi-sig wallet. You lock that Bitcoin up. In return, you receive something called eCash, which is, similar to like fiat. Like, you lock your gold up, you receive fiat, you receive $1, and then you get to move that around very fast and freely and privately. And so Fedimint basically lets you do the same thing, but you just completely lost your self-sovereignty. And as you can see here, even on their own website, they talk about all the different trade-offs that this solution provides you, and one of those is the custodial risk, and that's because you are letting other people hold your Bitcoin keys, and this has always just been a risk. Literally, there's a phrase in crypto: not your keys, not your coins, but they want to pitch you a layer 2 solution where you go ahead and just not listen to this warning anymore and just let other people have the keys to your coins. You also have debasement risk. So the risk to a user is that they may be left holding eCash notes that are not matched to Bitcoin in the Federation vault, which is basically what happened with gold when people started adopting fiat. They started printing more fiat than there was actually gold available to back it. And then you had debasement risk. So this is literally just reinventing the same flawed system that we're currently living in. And then you have regulatory risk. The Fedimint protocol has been designed to fit a particular regulatory niche, one in which people custody assets for friends, family, and community interests where there is no profit motive. The risk deals with the threat of changing regulations, meaning this is no longer the case, and the mint is forced to shut down or divulge user information. And that is the problem with this. Whenever you have to trust a couple of people to hold your Bitcoin so that you can actually now move your Bitcoin around, it just becomes easier single points of failures, because now you know exactly who's holding a good chunk of Bitcoin and who you need to target to basically disrupt the whole entire system here. And there's also something called the Lightning Network gateway risk, and then something else called the continued operation risk. So these are all the trade-offs that this just introduces here. So I really don't understand why anyone would think any of this is the future. And so the question is, why Kaspa? Why does Kaspa come onto the scene, and why is it actually a really great alternative to give us something that is truly a peer-to-peer digital cash system in the digital world? Well, Kaspa, first off, is internet speed proof of work, which is just never seen before, and basically doesn't have any competition to any other proof of work system out there. Its transactions can be handled at internet speeds. It also is able to scale the base layer to actually handle the masses over time as adoption comes in. And Bitcoiners may try to push a narrative where they say that money always scales in layers, but in reality, at the end of the day, this is a brand new system, monetary system that we're trying to fight for, and it's in the digital world, and Kaspa is proving that you can actually scale the base layer, and you don't have to sacrifice decentralization or security to do so. Kaspa can handle over 200 million transactions in a single day as a proof of work network, and personally, I just believe the masses are going to be flocking to something that is actually convenient for them to use, and something that is very familiar to what they're used to when they are on the internet. I mean, if we're thinking of people accepting Kaspa as a payment, what do you think is going to be easier? Trying to adopt these layer 2 solutions, which just reintroduces a lot more complexity, more centralization, you lose your self-sovereignty, and just a whole lot of other bad things? Or would someone just be willing to find a Kaspa application, set up a wallet, show their QR code, and then literally accept Kaspa right away? And at the click of a button, when I click send right now, you're going to see that Kaspa is going to instantly appear into this wallet like it just did right now at internet speeds. So because of Kaspa's scalable design, it is not only something that can be a very great store of value, but it also can be a very great medium of exchange, because it actually enables you to remain on the base layer. You can have your transactions be very fast and very, very cheap, and you can also keep your self-sovereignty and never have to move to a layer 2, because Kaspa is expected to continue adapting to the amount of adoption that may come in the future. So this is why I encourage everyone to do their due diligence and study Kaspa. Thank you guys so much for watching that video. If you have not considered getting yourself a Tangem card, Tangem have these nice limited edition Kaspa wallets, and if you use the code Kaspa Silver at the checkout, you will receive 10% off your order, and I do receive a commission for that, and it greatly does support my channel. If you hold your Kaspa on an exchange, you may never see your Kaspa again if that exchange was to go bankrupt or they get hacked or something like that. Because whenever you hold Kaspa on an exchange, you don't actually own your Kaspa. This is why it's so important to self-custody your Kaspa in your own wallet, and Tangem is a great way to do that. Thank you again for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here, and as always, don't be average, be different.